I'm Jeannie Chen. I'm part of the Equity Across the Curriculum team. And we're really pleased to welcome you to What is Trans and Non-Binary Justice? And this is an event that is geared towards helping faculty, staff, and other campus members. I know that we also may have some community members present, but the goal is to understand how to better support trans, non-binary, intersex, two-spirit, and gender-expansive students and colleagues and community members. And just a little bit about the Equity Across the Curriculum team, if you don't know the EAC. This is an initiative which brings together a group of faculty and staff across UW to organize professional development. And basically the goal is to deepen our practice of liberatory pedagogy in our work together. So I do want to, I'm going to hand it over to Sarita, another member of the team.
Thank you, Jeannie. So I'm going to get started with the land acknowledgement. We are at the University of Washington, Bothell, which was built upon the unceded homeland of the Willow Sammamish people. Our campus also touches on the shared waters of tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Mapuche nations. What this means for me and for folks here who are educators living in the region is to commit to learning about the history and culture of these communities and the process of decolonization of our educational practices, and to commit to showing solidarity for the continued fight for Indigenous sovereignty. We hope that today's workshop can be a part of this effort. So I'm going to talk next about the agenda for today's session. And so we'll start with a talk, and Harlan is here, and we'll be with a talk, and this talk is open to all people here in this space. We'll then transition, so the talk will be a 30-minute talk on what is two-spirit and trans justice. And with First Nations Cree scholar and community organizer Harlan Pruden. This is the second part of the series on what is two-spirit, trans, non-binary, and intersex justice. We'll then take a 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene at 2:40 p.m. To 4 p.m. for a faculty and staff in-person workshop. And again, Harlan will be leading us. We'll be discussing case studies with facilitator Harlan. And then our hope is to set aside the last half hour for mingling and refreshments. You're also welcome to grab something even as we continue the talk and then the presentation. So I'm now going to pass the mic to our EAC team member, Cynthia Chang, who will be introducing Harlan Pruden.
I'm really excited and grateful to introduce our guest speaker, Harlan Pruden, Nehiyaw, First Nations Cree Nation. Harlan works with and for the Two-Spirit community locally, nationally, and internationally. Currently, Harlan is the Indigenous Knowledge Translation Lead at Chi Mamuk, an Indigenous health program at BC Center for Disease Control, and is also a co-founder of the Two-Spirit Dry Lab, North America's first research group and lab that exclusively focuses on two-spirit people, communities, and or experiences. So please join me in giving Harlan a big welcome.
I'll undress and dress. How would you, Jamie? Test. Danze. Kinanas kontinena wawa. A formal thank you in my language. Danze. Harlan Pruden, Egwa Wakat no mani egwa motormouth maple ikasa ni ne hiao ni ha ayakwe. Kinanas kompinen na wawa Coast Salish. Kinanas kompinen na wawa University of Washington brothel. I want to say brothel. And I was like, don't. I did. They're like, where are you going? I'm like, to a brothel. And I'm happy. Buffalo. So welcome. So my government name is Harlan Pruden. And I use the I word, Indian. My Indian name, my traditional name is Wakat no Mani. I was doing some work on the Rosebud Reservation, and they honored me with the name Wakat no Mani. Wakat being spirit, like good spirit, bad spirit, neutral spirit. I can do good just as well as I can do bad. And the worst, suck up a lot of space and do nothing, right? So that part of my name is how do I want to show up? And so I try to show up with good words, good actions, and good thoughts. When I fall short of that intention, a mistake or a misstep is only a mistake or a misstep if we don't learn from it. These are learning opportunities. Nom is to, and Mani is a sacred journey. And so I was going to get that translated into Cree. I'm First Nations Cree. My mother was a member of the Beaver Lake Indian Reserve, and when she married my father, her band registry went to Saddle Lake. She was the only daughter from my kukum, my grandmother, that married another Nietzsche. All of my aunts married non-Nietzsches, and they got their band registry revoked. Legally, they were no longer Cree. So this is the complexities and this history that we want to try to compact. I also said in my language that I am two-spirit, niha ayakwe. And we'll be unpacking what that means and what is the application, the relevancies of those teachings and ways for us today, but also to create a little space for an intercultural dialoguing and sharing of our teachings and our ways that we would love to gift folks. So that is what we're going to, that's the intention. The clicker is not working, so I'm going to have to run back and forth. Again, for the Two-Spirit Dry Lab, for the second talk, we're going to dig into the research group. This is our logo. Oh yeah, my other name is going to be Motormouth Mabel. 30 minutes, okay? This is the lab.
Would it help if one of us...
No, that's fine. So this is the lab, and we are a trans and multidisciplinary group of settler and indigenous folks that are coming together to do Two-Spirit research that centers and honors Two-Spirit and indigenous people. But we're going to talk about who and what Two-Spirit people are. So the first thing is this concept of Two-Spirit. Often it's listed alongside other identities. You either have like 2S/LGBTQI+, or it's like tacked on at the end, LGBTQI 2S+. But it's not an identity, because implicit with identity is an endpoint, and you flesh that out. Where for Two-Spirit, it's a way to organize the community, and it's a way to identify the community. And so it's a community organizing tool or strategy for those individuals who are indigenous to Turtle Island, and only Turtle Island, and in descriptive terms, who are gender and or sexually diverse, or I don't even want to use non-normative, but that's what it is, right? Is it? Nope.
No?
No.
Oh, the laser is working, I'm sorry.
So it's a community organizing tool and strategy. And then a part of this concept is that it doesn't make sense unless it's contextualized or embedded within an indigenous or Native American community or framework or understanding. So you remove it from the ingenuity, it no longer makes sense. And then finally, it's a gender analysis within a pre-contact setting as opposed to a sexual orientation. Like when I introduced myself and I said my gender, niha ayakwe, I didn't say that I was a man, niha napueo, nor did I say I was a woman, niha asqueo. I said niha ayakwe. And so it was a gender analysis as opposed to a sexual orientation analysis. And within a pre-contact setting. But there was same-sex sexual relations, it's just that we didn't think of them that way. And so I stripped out 4 slides where we talk about sex, because we only have 30 minutes. Today, most people associate the term with lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, intersex, non-binary, and the list goes on and on and on. Indigenous people, however, the work of Two-Spirit organizations, leaders, community members, is more akin to this traditional understanding of who were we within a pre-contact setting, and what is the relevancy and the application of that knowledge and way for us today. So this is the closest that you're going to get to a definition. It's more of a framework, because it's not. There's no one way of being Two-Spirit. Okay, I'm not even going to do. So where did Two-Spirit come from? So those nations that had a Two-Spirit tradition, or non-binary, or more than 2 genders, we had our own words within our own languages that named, accounted, and identified our Two-Spirit relatives. We'll show a little bit about that. And so in 1492, it's a big year for us as Native people, right? Because that's when CC shows up on our shores, plants the Spanish flag, and says, "Ha ha, I've discovered you." Well, the counter-narrative of that is the Indigenous people of the Greater Antilles on October 10th, 1491. They woke up and they discovered CC on their shores. So this is important. And as members of getting an education and within the academy, so what's that framework in the background? Where we were discovered, or we discovered them. We must always figure out what's that framework at play, and are there counter narratives? So if that's the one thing you take away from that talk, you're golden. Is what is going on back there that influences my thoughts. The word berdache was used up until around 1989, 1990. And there was these French missionaries that were wandering around Turtle Island, and they saw these male folks that were hanging out and doing the work of women, and females that were hanging out and doing the work of men and going out on war parties. And the French missionaries were like, this doesn't fit into my rigid binary gender system. Okay, well, they didn't even say that. They were invoke the book, the good book. God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, right? So they were like, what do we call them? What do we call them? And so there was this Persian word, barja. And then it spread throughout Europe. It first showed up in Italian, bardasso. Then it showed up in Spanish, bardaxa. And then in the early 16th century, about 1525, it shows up in French as berdache. But if we go back to the Persian word, it wasn't a kind word. It literally translates into a young man or boy who serves another male's as a succubus. You have to Google that word because it's a crazy A word. Succubus, S-U-C-C-U-B-U-S, or a male homosexual prostitute. It was all about sex. And about a particular role within sex. On man hot sex, and we hope it's hot, right? Because it's just a waste of time and it's not, right? You're like, yeah, beige. I should paint the ceiling beige. That's when it's not hot. But when man hot sex, there are 2 positions in a dyad. And that is what we would call the anal male receptive partner, i.e. the bottom, and a top. What they were narrowly talking about within that framing is only the anal male receptive partner, i.e. the bottom. So starting in 1975 in the Bay Area, Brandy Burns, Barbara Cameron formed the Gay and Lesbian American Indian Organization. And then this conversation that happened of who are you? And what is our history? And that culminated at the conversation started in 1989, but in 1990 at the 3rd annual Basket and Boat Gathering of Native Americans that happened just outside of Winnipeg in Manitoba, a council was called. And what the community said, and it was a bunch of different nations that were represented there. And they're like, how do we organize in a transnational space? And so after many, many rounds and much discussion, they landed on the term Two-Spirit. They wanted a term that reflected a combination of both masculinity and femininity, which attributed to males in feminine roles and females in masculine roles. And there you get the pivot. The pivot was away from sex and sexual orientation, but it was about your role within society, and a pivot towards gender. And so these non-binary, these conceptions of non-binary understandings that were already pushing that, even though we didn't have the word non-binary at that time within the general ethos. But it's also incredibly important to note that it was a political statement. It was a statement of sovereignty of body and sovereignty of land. They're like, you French missionaries, you members of the academy that are studying us and naming us, what gives you that right? That right belongs to us, and we choose Two-Spirit. Now, it sent the academy into a flummox. They're like, what do you mean I can't use this word? What do you mean the community says Two-Spirit? I've seen papers published up to around 1996. So if you see a paper that says Berdache, the scholarship may hold true. The term we find offensive. Take a pen, not a pencil, cross it out, and write Two-Spirit. Not two-spirited, we're not a verb. Not two-spiritness, we're not an adjective. Just Two-Spirit. And if you're writing about us, Word's not going to like you, it'll be a little red because it'll want, but it's Two-Spirit. So how do we understand a world that has more than two genders? And so this list is a survey. I just looked across Turtle Island, I just picked and chose examples. Each item is nation-specific. And so I'm not going to go through the whole list. What I'm going to do is juxtapose from a Cree way and then a Sioux way. Okay, so if I were making all a part of the Cree nation, right? First of all, how does it feel to be a part of the best nation in the whole wide world? Pretty sweet, right? So the way that us Crees, or Nihiaus, how we formed, is that we had two big dominant camps or two big dominant societies. And there was also a division of labor. So I want to split the room right here in half. Y'all on this side of the room, you're a part of the men's camp, Napueo. Y'all on this side of the room, you're a part of the women's camp, Esquia. Now there was a division of labor. Y'all hunted and y'all gathered. There's a lot more to your work, but I'm just distilling it down, hunting, gathering, right? And also you spoke a different language. Well, no, you spoke a technical language. No different from the technical language that you use here, like entourage. Sorry, Howard. Everyone gets a hug later, okay? So, like a technical language of like poli-sci 301, econ 205. That's a technical language that's of this culture. And so we had a technical language of gathering and a technical language of hunting, of your role. But also incredibly important is that a Napueo was never allowed in an Esquia camp. And an Esquia was never allowed in a Napueo camp. Was that good? Was that bad? Well, that's just the way that we rolled. And so if there was ever imbalance or disharmony amongst these two camps, an Esquia couldn't walk over to the Napueo camp and think, what are you silly gooses up to today? And the Napueo couldn't walk over to the Esquia camp and say, what's the skinny, right? But us as a Yahweh, we had unfettered and equal access. We were often schooled in your technique of gathering, thereby we can connect to the language. The technique of hunting, and we knew the intricacies of your language. And so if there was ever imbalance or disharmony or discord, I could float over to the men's camp. Hey man, what's going on? Interesting. Oh man, what's the skinny? Wow, seems to be a misfire in communication. Listen, Napueos, this is what's happening. Listen, Esquias, this is what's happening. Let's talk this through, and I will be the communicator. And Napueo couldn't do this, and Esquia couldn't do this, but just us as a Yahweh could do this. So another way of thinking about that is Napueo hunting, Esquia gathering, we mediating. And so some nations had 12 genders. And if they had 12 different camps, each gender providing a role or a function that no other gender could perform. And so when we go through the list later on, you will see that there are multiple listings for different genders. Now, if I were Sioux, I wouldn't be known as a Yaqui, I'd be known as a Winkbay. And there wouldn't be a social expectation that I'd be a mediator, but there would be a social expectation that I would be the officiant of a naming ceremony. So that's why, so Two-Spirit is going to mean your role, and Two-Spirit is going to mean something different if you're Cree, Anishinaabe, Sioux, Dene, Nuchalnath, and the list goes on and on and on. That's why if Two-Spirit is positioned as an identity, do you see how it's nonsensical? Because it's going to mean something completely different. So I've collected about 130 words, and I built upon this database. This database is from Willie Roscoe, who worked with the Bay Area Gay American Indian Organization, Radley Burns, Robert Cameron, and as well as community leaders. There are errors, there are omissions, and there's flat out wrong information in these next 9 slides. You're like, pump the brakes, Harlan, why are you getting out misinformation? Well, what I try to do is to do a triple validation process, and where I find the words, like this Cree entry was validated by 21 Cree elders. And so what I try to do, I just don't accept the word of the first native speaker. I try to find 3 people and put them to clean up the translation, and are there words, are these the right words? So if you're Indigenous to Turtle Island and you don't see your nation, you have some work to do. If you are Indigenous and you see your word, validate it. You have work to do. These 2 terms were gifted to me within the last 3 years. Gwasala is in northern BC. Nuchalnath is in northern Vancouver Island. And it's been about 75 years since these words have shown publicly. I remember doing this talk, and I had a Nuchalnath elder, Lillian Howard, that came to me with tears in her eyes. She said, you know, I really wish that my relative would have known this word before they took their life. So these words are power. I'm going to make up time. I'll email you a copy of this so that you can digest it. And you can share it, whoever I sent the link to. The Tlingit one, I'm working on this. When the ethnographer was like, hey, Tlingit people, what does this mean? And when I heard, I'd get to validate this, the third validation. But from 2 validators, they were like, yeah, it means the person doesn't fight. And the European ethnographer goes, we have a word for that. Coward. And it has a negative connotation. And so English hides, and that's why it's a loose translation. Until we can get better translations, we work and update that entry. No different from Cree. Napoyokan, Asqueakan, fake woman, fake man. But you saw parenthetically that there was no negative connotations. It's just the brutality of English. Pretending, and I could have used other words, but my elders just said use fake, but know that it does not have a negative connotation in our ontology. The Wiyot, Northern California, which is one of our community partners who we'll be talking about briefly in the next thing. The Band Council just issued this beautiful statement, and they were like, this is our word for our Two-Spirit relatives. And so if you go to the Wiyot Band Council, you can read about that statement. It's powerful. Because what's powerful about that is they didn't go, queer community, LGBT, fight for equality. They were like, Wiyot means we are the people. And our people includes the Goma. They've always been here. And so they ignored the broader Western discourse, and they took a completely cultural, linguistic, language-centered conversation. It's power to read that and just see the frameworks that are at play. And it came from the Band Council. Their tribal leadership. Power. We're not alone. If you look at other Indigenous communities across the world, they have a similar sort of gender diversity, but we would not say they're Two-Spirit. Why? Well, they weren't present at that 1990 gathering. And so for me to say like the Fa'afafine in Hawaii, in Samoa, the Mahu in Hawaii, or the Bulbul in Pakistan, or the Kinnar in India, for me to say that they're Two-Spirit, that would be me posing our ways on the rest of the world. I would become a colonizer. So I'm looking for a big fat grant to convene a similar sort of convention, all of these gender and or sexually diverse individuals who are indigenous, and say, how do we want to organize? It is under the auspices of Two-Spirit, or is it a new term, or is it a new terms? But we have to have that conversation of how do we show up in solidarity to support other gender diverse people who are indigenous. Who are some of our Two-Spirit people from long ago? There's only about 20 known historical images of our Two-Spirit relatives. I have stories for every one of these pictures. I don't have time. This is Lozin, who fought alongside Geronimo's two sons. And Lozin, and the scholarship as well as this conversation is incredibly difficult. Like I remember like reading in the archive, there was Lozin, the woman warrior. I was like, huh, that's all they say. Find another little like gem in another text, who had a friend, and they didn't even air quote, Dotesi. Only I'm like, interesting, I have a friend. Dig a little more, who happened to be their wife, pictured right beside them. And Lozin is quoted of like saying that Dotesi, their wife, is they looked at them with this everlasting and enduring love. I was like, I want a partner like that. And so had I stopped here, Lozin would have been a woman warrior who happened to have a friend. Friend turned out to be their wife in an everlasting and enduring love. Is there another step? So for this entire talk, it's just what is known at this time. And it may change tomorrow. So it is built on sand. So I'm just showing you what we have today. These are Otish. And again, in the archive, Otish is known as Swajim, or finds them and kills them, or Otish, and they're from the Crow Nation. What's really cool about Otish, this is taken in 1848, I think, and Otish wanted to have a picture taken memorializing them in their funeral attire, how they were going to meet their creator. But for Otish is, first of all, when the Crows were slapped on their reservation, the Indian agent said, honey, you have a man part, you put pants on. And the community thought it was so incredibly vile and disrespectful, they had that Indian agent fired. Brought in another Indian agent, and Lozin took their attire. Then Lozin saw the writing on the walls, the harshness of colonization that was going to start coming down. And what Lozin did was started reaching out to other Two-Spirit people, pulling them together, housing and holding that knowledge. We as Two-Spirit people have been organizing since the beginning. And I don't think Two-Spirit people know that history, that we have been organizing, and that is our history. So we must keep that in mind, that we have always been active sites of resistance. Now, so this is the Carlisle Indian Industrial School, the first school of its type. It was opened in 1879, closed in 1918. About 100,000 Native children were ripped from their communities and went through these doors, and literally had their Indianness beaten out of them. So what does this have to do with Two-Spirit? Well, this has everything, and this has nothing to do with being Two-Spirit. You're like, pump the brakes, that sounds contradictory, right? Well, if we deconstruct this picture, we see, and I'm going to make the assumption that these are males, and their gender expression is coded as hair over the ear and pantsuits. Down here are young women and girls, and their gender expression is skirts and shoulder-length hair. And so through the residential boarding school system, is that there is this imposition of this rigid binary gender system that was imposed upon us as Native folks. Gone are the third, fourth, fifth, or even the 12 different genders, leaving room for only their two genders. We as Two-Spirit people, when we're forced to the margins, we're forced completely out of the framework. I know there's Two-Spirit people there. I will bet my eye teeth and my foreskin I am that tolerant. Okay, maybe not the foreskin. And then I think I want to be honoring of time. I love her. I don't know who she is, but I love her because she is telling me so many things. But like, y'all can take my picture, but I'm not going to give you all of it. We think that activism has to be some great, grand, heroic act. Closing down freeways, chaining yourself to trees. Yeah, that is activism. What she tells me is you do that which you can, and you call it a victory. And I think that these little acts of resistance allows me to be here today to sing a song and to share a story she's holding space for. Power. Inevitable act. I need voice, I need volume.
March 20th is now a day for all Two-Spirit.
Maybe it's on my computer. Did you? Oh, the volume is right there. Okay, I think so.
Okay.
March 20th is now a day for all Two-Spirit and Indigenous LGBTQIA+ to celebrate who they are with their own Awareness Day. Last year on March 20th, the City of Vancouver officially proclaimed the day. Now, the BC government has also proclaimed March 20th as Two-Spirit Day provincially. And here at the Junction Bar in Vancouver's West End, it's a packed house at an event called Tea and Bannock, where people can socialize and honor the day while recognize the importance of what it means to be Two-Spirit. Jesse, Dave, and Martin Morberg are with the Canadian-based Research Centre. They organize this event, and they say that today is historic and that they're both so proud to finally see this recognition.
So today we're hosting an event to share some of the Two-Spirit work that's been going on in the province of BC and across Turtle Island for the last year, as well as celebrate Two-Spirit folks and bring awareness to all of our allies and relatives about Two-Spirit people.
How are you feeling today, knowing that today's such a big day?
I mean, I think today it's really important to recognize and acknowledge a lot of the trailblazers that have broken trail for us to be here today. So it's just really about centering, highlighting, and elevating our Two-Spirit ancestors, our elders and knowledge keepers.
And one of those trailblazers is Harlan Pruden, a longtime Two-Spirit activist.
I think we have to have our political and elected officials acknowledge that we are a part of the community. Next year, I think that we can do better, and let's go for a federal proclamation, but ultimately, let's go for a federal holiday. That is my dream, and my heart is singing today, as well as it has sung every day, in which that we can come together out of love, out of respect, out of our sacred teachings of who we are.
Gail Pruden is also known as the Two-Spirit Cookum and is from Winnipeg. She is here to open the event with a traditional jingle dress dance and, in her words, spread some sacred medicine.
That we support all events happening in Two-Spirit in a good way. And so I brought my jingle dress and I've been dancing for close to 25 years now. And I'm doing my part by coming with my healing dress. When you have a two-spirit coming to your family, this is such a unique gift. Not everybody has a two-spirit in their family. And this is a gift from Creator. It's up to the family to nurture, raise this two-spirit in a good way.
Tina House, ABTN National News, Vancouver.
Two-spirit is the intersection of those who embody diverse sexuality, gender, both roles and expressions. And it is for people reserved that are Indigenous to Turtle Island. It is a community organizing tool and identity, and it will mean something different depending on what nation an individual is from or a member of. And it refers to a history or tradition that predates Western notions and concepts such as lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, queer, questioning, non-binary, intersex. The list can go on and on and on. Gender, same gender loving. But it is about the reclaiming and the restoring. This is important. Within the broader LGBT queer movement, is they're either asking for an expansion of an existing Western right, you saw that discourse around same-sex civil marriages, or they're asking for a new thing. Now, I'm not being critical. That's important work. I'm merely observing and reflecting. An expansion of a Western right or a new right. For us, within the Two-Spirit community, is about reclaiming and restoring of, like, remember when I used to have a role? Remember when I was honored and I was a full citizen and saw who I was within my nation, and my nation reflected me back. We're not asking for anything new. We're just asking for a remembering of our own people, and then an honoring from our settler relatives. And you are all my relatives. We are all connected. Remembering and restoring of a rightful place of honor, respect, and dignity within the individual's nation. This is deep decolonizing work that centers one's ingenuity and calls Two-Spirit people home, and it is about mending the sacred hoop. Joey Criddle, who is a Two-Spirit leader who is Hikara Apache, maybe not related to Geronimo, but Joey shared a prophecy that it is only when our Two-Spirit people are seated back in the circle will there be healing and wellness for Indigenous communities and peoples of this land. But that makes so much sense. You create welcoming and safe spaces for the least value within our society. We all benefit from those rights and privileges. And so I think that prophecy holds true not only for Two-Spirit people, but it holds true for all of us today. I share that prophecy with you, that until our queer people are seated at the table and seen, there will not be healing and wellness for us as a nation. Before I reach to say my granny said, here's the citations. Question, comments, and conversation, QCC. I'm gonna knock my poor Westerner friends who are all about acronyms, because I just create acronyms all the time. QCC, have at it. So that concludes this of who and what. Open up a little space of inquiry for discourse and dialogue. Take a break, and then we're going to come back and look at what is the application when we go into a research setting, and then of that teachings and ways, how will that impact how you operate on this campus? And there will be kind of cool things. For those folks that are either in school and researching, you will get tools on how to do better research. So with that, thank you so, so much. What did y'all think of that?
I love that image in the background. Where did you get it?
It's a piece of graffiti from Corey Bullpit, who is Haida. Haida Nation is one of our community partners. And if you're ever in Vancouver for Pride, go to Granville Island, and on the Granville overpass, it's a piece of graffiti. And so And so I reached out to Corey and I was like, hey Corey, can we use that? And he just signed a waiver. And so we use it and we have full rights to use it at all times. But yeah, it's a piece of graffiti in Vancouver. Yes. Oh wait, give me one sec. Every question is an act of generosity. And in my way, generosity must be another generosity.
Acknowledging my limited Western, imagination, etc. You talk about Two-Spirit, it's not an identity, and yet many say I am Two-Spirit, right? So can you kind of unpack that a little bit for me and help me think about that?
Also, we should repeat the question because we had an access request. So
So the question, well, the first question was, where did this image come from? It's a piece of graffiti, which I think is beautiful, street art. And then the next question was, unpack this when people say, I am Two-Spirit, because positionally it sounds like an identity, right? So it's just a way for us to identify, okay, there's a cut. I just unpacked it all. Now, one is folks may not know their word. And so when you, I can say, it is such a privilege and an honor that I can say Niha Ayakwe. But I've done this talk for all Native folks. I did a talk for almost 54 youth. None of them knew these words. So Two-Spirit becomes a little bit of a placeholder. And two is, it's all going to be dependent upon context. Like when I'm on a club dancing on Friday night, shirtless, on a speaker, I'm gay. I stand before you as a Two-Spirit person. But when I'm working with my Cree people, I'm a Yahweh. And so there's that flexibility, because on Friday night when I'm dancing and people are like, hey Harlan, what's Two-Spirit? I'm like, come back to me on Monday, I'm getting my groove on. I'm gay. And so we're not just stagnant. So someone who says I am Two-Spirit, there's a lot that's going on there. And I would just honor them and meet them where they are. That is cool. My first question is when someone says I am Two-Spirit, cool. What nation are you from? And they go, nation? I'm like, oh, you're not Two-Spirit. And I've had many non-Indigenous people, which we'll unpack next talk, using the term Two-Spirit. And I used to be harsh. I'm not. I think there is aspects of cultural appropriation, or what we say culture vultures. But there's also something incredibly evocative. And so incredibly, again, about reclaiming and restoring. We're not asking for anything new. We're asking for us to go back. And so it's a lived and embodied truth and experience. And as a queer person that's non-Indigenous, I'm like, I want that.
Thank you.
And so, but also for our non-Indigenous relatives, if the current regime is not speaking to you, you're like, am I not, what's non-binary? Am I non-binary? Or these fancy terms. If you don't see yourself in that, I encourage you to take a page from us, learn from us. From the Two-Spirit people, that gender diversity, this is my path. And I will tell you that I will do everything to fight, defend, lift up, and honor whatever you choose. And I would hope that that is mirrored back, and there's a fighting, defending, lifting up, and honoring of me being a Yahweh and my Two-Spirit community. And so I think that's what's really going on in that. Next question. Somebody shut me down.
I think can we maybe
pause?
take a pause? So thank you so much,
Cool,
Harlan.
thank you.